at all through the mic? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'm here to talk about jQuery deferred objects. So based on the weather and the scariness of the talk, I think a lot of people got scared away. It's a relatively advanced aspect of jQuery, so a lot of people are kind of scared about it. And with good reason. It's not well documented. It's a little difficult, so it's, I had a tough time wrapping my head around it in the beginning. But I got there, and I'm here today to bring you there. And if you're a beginner and never seen it before, hopefully at the end you'll be able to use it in a simple example. If you're already an advanced user, hopefully I'll give you a couple things to think of. So, who am I? I'm Matt Murchison. I'm a software engineer here at ZocDoc. I'm on the front-end team, and here the front-end team is not just JavaScript and HTML, CSS. We do pretty much full-stack development, but we're focused on the patient-facing, doctor-facing site, and mobile. So if you're looking for a job, obviously we're hiring. That's my mini plug. But you can find me later on Twitter as mmerch, or also find us, ZocDoc, at ZocDev, or at our engineering blog. We're constantly posting stuff. Cool. So that's me. So what are deferred objects? So if our gracious host kind of stole my first slide in his introduction to the meetup in the description. We had exactly parallel, the exact same idea, which is, hey, let's copy and paste the jQuery docs for this feature and show how convoluted it is. So, jQuery Deferred, introduced in version 1.5, is a chainable utility object that can register multiple callbacks into callback queues, invoke callback queues, and relay the success or failure state of any synchronous or asynchronous function. You're good, right? Okay, so done, right? We're good. So what? So Rebecca Murphy's a great writer about JavaScript, speaker, etc. So if you haven't heard of her, you should look her up. But she wrote, this is before the feature even came out. She's like, what they actually mean is the ability to register an interest in the outcome of an arbitrary asynchronous behavior, even if the outcome has already occurred. Even better, you can register your interest in the outcome of behavior that may or may not be asynchronous. So that's kind of cool. We'll come back to that a little bit later. So why? How? Okay. So first I'm going to talk about the JavaScript fundamentals that you need to understand before we talk about actual deferred objects. Then we're going to talk about deferred, and I'll have a couple examples in there, and then I'll do a final example at the end. So that's that. All right, chaining. Chaining is the pattern of executing a function immediately on the result of another function. It's usually achieved by returning the object the method belongs to. Who here has heard of chaining before? Yeah, okay. So here's a really simple chainable object. It does a thing, or it does another thing. But when it does those things, it returns this, so that you can just do a thing and then immediately do another thing. Every single time you use jQuery, every single time most users are using jQuery, $, you pass in a selector, and then you dot, that's chaining. You're using the result of that function and calling another function. The next pattern is callbacks. So that's assigning a function to be executed upon the completion of another task, right? So it's, hey, do this, and when you're done, do that. So in a lot of my code examples, I will start my sentences with, hey, because that's how I like to think the code. The code is a passive-aggressive boss of the computer. So it's like, hey, do this. Okay. Cool, so here's a simple callback. Here's a function that does stuff with data. We haven't written that part, but then it has an optional callback. So if the callback exists, we execute it. So obviously we're not checking that as a function, it's not perfect. So do stuff with data, you pass in your data, and then the second parameter is an anonymous function, which gets called at the end. Okay? Really simple. The last piece kind of, it combines callback. It uses callback, but it's Ajax. We all know that jQuery makes Ajax really easy. This is an example of a really simple Ajax call. Who here has used Ajax in jQuery before? Yeah, okay. We're all who's with me so far? Okay. Any questions about these basic fundamentals? No, good. All right, so let's say you have an application where you need to make multiple Ajax calls, and when you have all the data, you do something at the end, right? So this could happen in a lot of scenarios. We're going to talk about a specific scenario, which is you need to get Google Maps. You need to get one set of markers, or markers that you're going to stick on the map, from one source. You have to get another set of markers from another second source. And once you have all of them, you're going to draw your map, draw your markers. Okay? So here's some code. I pulled it out of the example app so that we can look at it and we'll talk about it. Okay? So there's three functions here: fetch Google Maps, fetch markers 1, and fetch markers 2. So fetch Google Maps is the only weird one because Google Maps has you pass into the string this callback. So that's why I have this weird global function over here that is just going to say, so fetch Google Maps, what are we doing? We're initiating an AJAX call. When it's done, Google's gonna execute that function. So I've defined it over there. And that's just going to tell this, hey, we're done. Okay? Does that make sense? Any questions about that particular piece? Okay. The only reason I'm asking if people have questions is because this is a topic that builds on itself. So if I lose a lot of people at one point, I'm not going to get you back. So please feel free to raise your hand. Yeah?
Which is a parent function, like the one which is calling everything?
Nothing. In this example, these are just utilities. We're not actually executing all of them yet.
Okay.
We're not starting the actual process yet. These are just functions. If you put this on a page, nothing will happen. Right? We're not executing the functions yet. I'm just giving you the building blocks that will show how it actually gets executed. Yeah?
You see you have two different fetch markers because that other one, markers2.json, markers2.json is returning a different
set of markers.
And you want to put them in different, like...
Yeah, theoretically they could be one third-party source and another third-party source.
Right.
It could be anything. So we have two different identical, they're different
Rather
only
just one
in
right
UI.
into it the same time.
Yeah, just because we want more, just to come. Cool. So yeah, fetch markers is initiating an AJAX request, and my simple app just waits 1 second and then returns the JSON. And this markers 2 waits 2 seconds and then returns the JSON. And then when we're done on success, we just store it somewhere where we're going to be able to access it later. Okay. So these are our building blocks for what I'm going to show you now, which is the first example. Cool. So our app is up. So here's what our page looks like when we hit it. We wait a few seconds because it takes a long time, and it brings in the thing. So this is the dumbest way you could fix this problem, right? We're doing it serially. What we're doing now is we're fetching Google Maps, and when we're done with fetching Google Maps, we fetch markers 1. When we're done with markers 1, we fetch markers 2. When we're done with markers 2, we make the Google Map. Right? That's one way to guarantee that all three of these things have finished before you make the Google Map. It's not a smart way, but it's a way. Okay? So this is the bad way to do it. Don't do it this way. What's a faster way to do it? Here's a better version of the code. It's going to run. You'll notice you'll wait. It's like 2 or 3 seconds instead of 4 seconds for this to load. Actually, click it. Cool. So what this does is for each of these AJAX calls, we've declared a Boolean, which is whether or not that is completed, right? So whenever each of these complete, we set the Boolean and then we try to make the Google Map. Try to make Google Maps is like, hey, is everybody finished? If not, let's quit. So only the third and slowest of those AJAX calls will actually get the map making going on. Okay? So this obviously is a lot faster because we're initiating fetch Google Maps, fetch markers 2, fetch markers 2, all in parallel, right? We're just boom, boom, boom. And as soon as they're all done, once we've got them all back, we make our map. Okay?
You're still limited to going to one source, right?
I'm sorry?
You're still limited going to the one site.
In this case, fetch Google Maps is actually going to Google and getting Google Maps.
Right.
And these two are hitting my own application.
Okay, but you're still limited, I think, as far as I know, you're still limited to being only having 2 outstanding AJAX calls at a time, right? And one of them is usually reserved for the browser, and the second one is reserved for AJAX. So they have to be kind of serialized, no?
No. You can have more than 2. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure you can definitely execute more than 2.
I have to double check later. I thought it was only 2.
Sometimes browsers block you up if you go to the same subdomain. So one trick is you can
Just do
different subdomains and parallelize that way.
Thanks, Trevor. That's Trevor. We're developers without that.
But there's a limit of 2, right? Yes, that's true.
Cool. All right, so let's go back and we'll talk about how deferreds work. And then we'll show you the best way to execute that exact problem. So when we make an AJAX call, usually we just pass in some options, right? This is how we do it. But what if we use the return value of the AJAX call? What is that? Has anybody ever thought about that? Before jQuery 1.5, what it returned was the native XML HTTP request object, right? And that is, it's something, but it doesn't give you a lot of extra perks. After 1.5, we got this jQXHR, which is a superset of the XHR, so it gives us these additional abilities, such as this. Instead of specifying your callbacks in the AJAX options, you can actually add them after you initiate the AJAX request. Right? You can initiate multiple calls for the same type, right? You can initiate multiple error callbacks instead of passing in an anonymous function that executes both functions, or something like that. Okay. So this gives you a little bit more leeway. So what if this AJAX request finishes before you attach one of these? It will immediately fire, right? If the AJAX request was successful, anything you add with success will immediately execute. Okay. So this is kind of cool. So how does it do it? It uses the deferred. It uses a deferred implementation. So deferred is a spec that someone decided upon. It's not really a spec, but it's an idea, and there are different implementations of it. And I'm going to show you how jQuery implements it. So what's a deferred object look like? We create it using this $deferred function. Okay? We've got a deferred object, and it starts in a pending state. You have two options. You can resolve it or reject it. When you resolve it, it becomes resolved. It's in that state. When you reject it, it goes into a rejected state. Once you've resolved or rejected it, you can't switch between. So, the idea is you create a deferred object. When you resolve it, all of the success callbacks are going to be executed. When you reject it, all of the failure callbacks will be executed. We're going to show you. We're going to see more of that very soon. So don't get it. Any questions about this?
Is there any order in which it gets resolved? Like, it gets...
It executes the function in the order in which you registered.
What happens if there is an object right in between all of them, which I want to share?
Sorry?
If there is an object in between all of them, if I'm sharing that
You
object...
can put it somewhere outside of all those functions that all of them have access to. Or you can, I'll show you later, there's a function that allows you to change these deferred functions and pass data between them.
So how would I take care of the scenarios where I want one particular function to finish and then the second one to start? Like, the object is being shared, I want the first one to finish only, then it makes sense to start the second one.
In that situation, you can just have, so you initiate, okay, so you have one deferred, right? You attach a done callback to it, right? Right here, done is the function you use to attach success callbacks. And when it's done, you pass it a function, and that function is the second thing you want to have when it's complete. Does that make sense?
And excuse me, whenever somebody has a question, can you guys speak into the mic so everybody else can hear your questions as well? Thank you.
Cool. So these are the different functions you can use to register callbacks with your deferred. You can use done for success, or you can pass an array of success functions. You can use fail for failures, errors. You can use then if you want to, it's just a shortcut to do success in the first parameter, fail in the second parameter. Or you can do always. And always will actually, the functions you pass using always will get called on success or failure. Okay? So these are the three states. You can register callbacks at any time. Just like the AJAX function, it doesn't matter if the AJAX function has just started, if it's failed, or if it's succeeded. You can attach callbacks to it at any time.
I noticed in your last example, under the always, so can you just keep adding the callback functions one after another? Like at the very bottom, it says always callback A, always callback B. Can you just keep adding them on?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be two. It could be like
okay.
as many as you want. Cool. So now this thing that we saw before, success, error, error, you can actually also use done, fail, done and fail. Success just uses done, just alias.
Why two errors?
Sorry?
Why two errors?
Just because I wanted to demonstrate that you can attach multiple callbacks of the same type, right? So let's say you have a generic error handler. Anytime there's any kind of error, you want this callback to be called. But if something goes wrong in a specific function, you want a specific business logic related error handler to be attached to it. So you want to attach both. Yes?
Give me a sec. Can we fix the jitter on the screen? Hold on.
Is this just...
We have a question already.
Yeah.
Why? So if there are two error handlers,
Yep.
and one's generic, one's business logic, so the syntax would be exactly the same.
Syntax.
Am I seeing that wrong? Like syntax is exactly the same for both of them.
Yeah. Well, the syntax to apply an error handler. Yes. It's only generic business logic because I said that it's in the comments. It's not really inherently.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, so if you have multiple error functions, is the order defined or they can fire in any order?
It will fire in the order in which you attach them.
Okay. And is there any difference between error and fails? Or it's the same thing?
Today, no. But I'll see. I'll show you a slide later. jQuery 1.8 is actually deprecating this. So if you're doing it, if you're applying a callback after to the response of an AJAX,
Yeah.
pretty soon you will only be able to use fail. So everyone should start using that.
Right.
Yeah.
So why have two error functions instead of having one function do two things?
It's more elegant. It's really like that's what it comes down to when it comes to this feature. Is a lot of times like when I show you how to fix the multiple AJAX solution, it's going to be more elegant. It's not going to be faster. It's just going to be cleaner and from a coding perspective better. But this feature isn't giving you anything you couldn't do before, like couldn't hard code before. Okay. Cool. So remember this. This is the life cycle of the deferred object. Just wanted to show you that so you can remember it. So let's imagine how AJAX might be implemented under the hood. Okay. So it initiates the AJAX request. When it receives a response, it either calls that success function you passed in or that failure function you passed in. This is how the deferred correlates. Inside the AJAX, somewhere, it's creating a deferred object. It's either resolving or rejecting. Okay. Does that make sense?